People always ask how I balance my family life with 400 shows a year. I'm just doing what I love with the people I love. It's my magic life.
I like Wes Iseli. I like everything about him.
All right, well, today isn't a magic day. Today is going to be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
We have an author by the name of Jack Houston, and he wrote a book called Nurse Jack, and it says true hospital stories, hospital covering up a rape, crime, drug abuse, tragic loss, and comical stories. And then he has another clipping here that says, if you're a fan of, I can't find it now, if you're a fan of ER, Grey's Anatomy, you will love to read this book. Jack, I was telling you before the podcast started, man, my mom's a nurse. She came home and told us stories all the time. Whether she was allowed to tell these stories or not, probably not. But we don't know who the people were. We don't have a face to put with it. She didn't tell us names.
Okay.
She just said an instant happened. So, I mean, I've grown up with these stories of stuff that's happened in the hospital. You know, Natalie's dad is a doctor, although he probably wasn't as liberal telling stories as my mom was.
No.
But we're fascinated, man. We're interested. So, everybody, it's Jack Houston. What's up, buddy? How are you, man?
Hi. Thanks for having me today. Yeah, there's lots of stories. You said your mom used to tell you stories. You know, every nurse, I think, tells stories like that. But as long as you keep confidentiality, you know, and you don't say obvious things that, you know, if there's only one person in town in a truck accident that day and all the police were there, you know what I mean? You wouldn't mention that. But, I mean, you'd be surprised at how many times these stories are similar to many, many other stories that nurses have had. You know, it goes on and on. But anyway, as long as you're confidential with it, you know, which I have been in the book. I haven't said the patient's names. I've had to, you know, change their names, obviously. And the first thing is to protect your patient, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. So,
anyway,
yeah, go ahead.
So anyway, there is lots of stories in here, and I like to tell people, some of them are very, very bad, obviously. And I didn't tell the stories just to tell how very bad it can be in the hospital, but I want people to be aware of things do happen. So when you think something's not right, speak up. Ask questions. Don't just assume the nurse or the doctor always knows what they're doing or always has your best interest. You know, you got to voice your opinions, and if you have a sick relative, they can't speak for themselves, you need to be doing that for them. You know, people put doctors and nurses on the pedestal sometimes. And
Yeah.
it's not always the best thing.
I don't even know where to start, man. There's so many different things. My mom told me a story one time about a lady, I think it's called Munchausen syndrome. That's where you do something to your child so you get attention, correct?
Yeah, well, sadly, there's a lot of that goes on.
Well, Mom told me a story. It wasn't Munchausen syndrome. It was the mother wanted attention. So she would clean the fish tank of her aquarium and take the algae and stuff and inject it into herself and couldn't figure out why she was getting sick and getting, you know, so that my mom said she felt bad for the child because the child was without a mother because the mother was always in the hospital. And then they finally figured it out after time and time again that the mother was, they took away her fish tank. I mean, they knew they finally figured out that she was injecting herself with algae to try to get attention. She had people checking on her 12 times a day, and that's what we hate about the hospital.
Right.
We've
Yeah.
only, given birth, so, the nurses checking on you all the time. You're like, I just want some sleep.
Yeah.
But some people just crave that attention, man. It's so sad.
Yeah, the hospital's no place to go to get any sleep, that's for sure. Some people can manage, but it's pretty rough in there for that. But yeah, I've seen many things like that. I worked psych for a lot of years as well, and it's amazing what people put in their bodies. Like, it's just, I've seen, we have to, on a forensic unit or a prison ward, people get out for privileges and they move from unit to unit, so we have to wand them with a metal detector. And you hold it up to somebody's belly and beep, beep, beep. Well, that
Yeah. No kidding. Goodness.
So you said you worked in the psych ward, and you were also, I mean, you were a nurse in a regular hospital, then went to the psych ward, or were you always in the psych ward? What is your
No,
background?
I've kind of bounced around. I've worked what we call med surg for medical patients, surgical patients. Did a bit of home health for a while. In Texas, the place I worked is called home health. Different agencies call it different names. So basically, you're going door to door. You know? And, ICU, ER, psych hospitals, prisons, all kinds of places. I've worked quite a wide variety of areas.
Wow. Yeah, my mom did the home health care thing too. She said the pay was better than the hospital, but they didn't have the benefits. So she had to take that with it.
Yeah, it can be better, but it just depends on the agency. Like, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes it just depends how much money you're lucky to get granted to you either by the government or if it's a private agency. It's always different. Right?
So how long were you in the business? How long were you a nurse?
A little over 30 years.
Yeah, you've
So,
racked up
long
some
time.
stories.
A long time.
You probably have another 6 books in you just over 30 years.
Well, yeah, you could probably write more than 6. It's unreal. But I'm on the second one now, working on the second one. But the first one I tried to pick a variety of stories, and the second one I don't know if I'm going to do that or mix it up a little bit. But yeah, there's lots of stories. I used to work with a fellow after we'd have a big incident or something and things would go all to hell. He'd be venting and saying, somebody should write a book about this place. Of course, he used a lot more adjectives, but, I always was thinking, well, I probably should write a book about this place. But anyway, here we are. I did, I guess.
So is your book about a certain place you worked, or is it just stories racked up over 30 years?
No, it's stories from there's one or two in there from when I was a student nurse, just learning right through to the end. So it's kind of spread out all over the place.
Wow. All right.
What? Why did you decide to write the book?
Well, when I retired, I was sitting off, nothing to do, and after working so hard for so many years, nothing to do isn't right. You have to do something. And I guess at first I was writing in a time, I'll write something down for my kids to read when I'm older or something like that, or when I'm gone, or, just something to do. I found it kind of therapeutic, actually. And then a friend of mine, she encouraged me to try to get it published, so I said, well, I don't think anybody wants to read my stuff, but, I'm not really a writer. And she said, well, you're not a writer yet, but try to get it published. So anyway, here we are. I got it published, and I guess I am a writer. So it's getting good marks. I'm getting 4.5 stars out of 5 globally, so I'm surprised at that. I was thinking I'm going to get 1s and 2s or something, but anyway, so.
Well, that's great.
I didn't really, if anyone in my family found out, when they hear I wrote a book, it's like, what do you mean you wrote a book? You? They don't believe it. But, because I always hated school, I hated writing, I hated anything to do with school,
Yeah, but when you're
So,
passionate
I
about
tried.
something, it kind of writes itself. When you're passionate about a project, it just comes through.
Well, the thing is, the book, not to sound high on my horse or anything, but, it wasn't that hard to write because I've already written all these stories. I didn't write them the same. Like, when you have an incident with a patient, you have to document it and write it thoroughly. And you have to write it very, very exact until you're going to court because you never know, right? So I've already written these stories, so they're kind of committed to memory, and they're the ones that kind of stuck out. Now, when I wrote it, first time, I didn't put in the adjectives or, make comical remarks about it or whatever. So I put a little flair into it when I wrote it this time and made it a little bit easier for the common reader to understand, not all the technical stuff, right?
Right.
But essentially, I knew the stories. It's not like I had to sit down and create a novel and write something from scratch,
Yeah.
So, can you share a funny story with us that won't ruin the book?
Well,
Because I know there's heavy
funny
ones.
stories in it. Well, yeah, there's a lot of heavy ones. There are some funny stories in it. It's hard to tell all of them because they kind of aren't funny until the end when it all comes together, kind of
Oh,
thing.
okay.
But there are some things, like this one I get to this one house, and I had to do what's called a pori tap. I had to access it. That's a little device we put underneath your skin, just like in your chest. You kind of attach it to your ribs, but we put a lap of skin over it. It's for somebody who has no veins left. But anyway, I had to go into this old man's house and do this procedure. Well, as soon as I opened the door, this dog starts barking and wailing away, and I thought, oh, this is great. But anyway, he didn't bite me. He kind of settled down. And his wife, the guy's wife, says, well, he's in there. Just points to the bedroom, you know. And I didn't realize, because I hadn't been briefed, obviously this man had dementia, and I believe his wife did as well. And so I'm doing this procedure, and you have to be very sterile, because you're sticking this needle in to the chest, which is very close to the heart. And underneath this little port, there's 3 little other hoses that go right into the heart. So you don't want to get it contaminated, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very complicated procedure when you're new at it. I'd only done one before. So I'm halfway through, I stick the needle in the fellow's chest. And he kind of comes to and starts punching me in the face.
Oh, no.
Because, I mean, all he knows is he's in his bedroom, and next thing you know, it's just a man sticking a needle in his chest.
Right.
You know, he doesn't understand what's going on. So I'm trying to block his punches, trying to protect the sterile field and the needle I've got hanging out of there, because I don't want to hurt him. And then the dog comes running around the corner growling, and I thought, oh, shit, I'm going to get tore up here. Well, it didn't bite me, but it did decide to start humping my leg.
I was waiting for the funny part. I'm like, this isn't funny at all.
What's that?
I was waiting for the funny part. I'm like, this isn't funny at all. This is horrible.
Well, it wasn't funny at the time. It was kind of funny later, and everybody laughed at me in the office later when I was back there washing my leg. But anyway, this thing just kept pumping away on me, and I was trying to shake it. And you can imagine me standing on one leg, my other leg in the air with the dog hanging off, and I'm trying to shake him off. And I yelled at his wife, can you help me out here? She just looks up from her knitting. She's sitting in the corner in a rocking chair and smiles and then looks back down, and I'm like, well, that's a lot of help. And anyway, so I finally kicked this little dog off. He kind of missed a stroke, and he hit this little flaw at the door about 5 feet away, slumped down, and he took off. I didn't want to hurt the dog, but at the same time, it was rather aggressive. But anyway, so I got done what I needed to do when I leave, and well, if the wife doesn't let the dog out with me, that's great. So it's growling all the way to the car, or the truck. And it let me get in, didn't bite me or anything, but then it whizzed all over my tire. And just kind of give me a look like, I don't like you anymore. You know what I mean? But
He was marking his
like
territory.
that,
He owned you.
yeah.
That's what that means.
Well, you know, you don't think when you're a nurse going in to take some blood from somebody that you're going to be molested by a little dog, you know. So, I mean, things like this happen, but there's a lot of funny things happen in the book, but they're hard to put into a quick little story. You know, you kind of have to read the
Oh, I totally
whole
get it.
story. A lot of it's about, you know, just comical things that happen over time. And we had another lady that she had dextrocardia, which basically your heart's on the wrong side. Some
Wow.
people are just born that way. The heart and everything's on the wrong side. Just everything shifted around. So she was pretty good girl. You know, lots of fun. So I would tease the other nurses and send them in. I'd say, we need an apical heart rate. And they'd be in there listening to her heart and couldn't figure it out. Couldn't hear anything. Couldn't figure out why, you know. And the old lady just looking at them like, what's wrong with you? You know. So you do a lot of those kind of antics. I tell people, have you ever seen the show MASH? You know, a lot of people used to watch MASH years ago.
I love that show.
Anybody that's older. And, you know, they used to horse around all the time. It's a coping mechanism. And
Yeah.
we certainly do that. You have to do that when you're working in a hospital. You can't get by without it, you know.
My brother's house just burned down, and I was telling my wife, I said, that's how he's coping. I mean, he's constantly cracking jokes, because if not, he's just in a corner. Like, he has nothing
Right.
left, and and it's like, some of the jokes are very dark, but it's like, that's how he's dealing with it right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
my
it's
mom...
therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was a home health care nurse, and since I was an up-and-coming magician in my teens, she would have me come to these patients that she was working all the time. Now, whether the agency knew I was there or not, I have no idea. But some of these guys were severely handicapped. I'm not in the business. I don't know how to you describe it, so I might be rude or whatever. I don't mean to be. But
No,
she just would suck the spit out of them, or they choke to death, or they were living on a machine, and if the power went out, she had to turn the oxygen machine on, the battery, and do something else, or the kid would end up brain dead for a third time because they've lost power before, and it keeps getting worse. So she has me go over there and do a magic show for them, and it's like you're not. There's nothing there. You're performing for nothing. And at the time, I'm like, Mom, I don't get it. I don't understand it. And then she's saying, yeah, but he's smiling. And I'm like, I don't see it. I don't see it. And the parents are telling me, thanking me. And those moments of childhood, my first time ever performing in a hospital, this was when I was 18, a long time ago, late 90s, I guess. I went to King's Daughters Hospital in Virginia Beach, and one of the nurses came over to me and said, you see that kid over there? He's stage 4 cancer. If he's here next week, it'll be a miracle. Why don't you go perform for him next? Now, obviously, with HIPAA laws, they're not allowed to do that. But that was how I got introduced into that world of entertaining sick people. Go perform for the dead person first, because he's going to be the first to go. He won't be here next week. Go see him. And go perform for the guy that's in a medicated coma. So now I do hospital visits, and people are like, wow, how do you do that? Well, these people have their eyes open. These people are able to talk to me. This is easy. I've seen the worst. So I'm having flashbacks because I've kind of forgot about these first instances. But yeah, you mentioned home health care and mom vacuuming mucus out of the kid's throat. It was literally a vacuum tube she stuck down and just sucked the snot out, and he's good to go for another hour. Yeah, that's not a fun audience to perform for.
Well, what you did for those people that don't respond to you, they know what's going on, a lot of them.
Yeah.
Some do, some don't. And that was a bigger thrill for them than going in front of thousands of people. Like, you did more good there than you would in front of thousands, because so many people, even if they're a good caretaker, you get used to taking care of a person like that. They don't have the interaction. People in their own family talk to them, but it's not the same. It gets less and less, and basically they sit there for hours. They sit there a lot, with nobody engaging them.
And what I've witnessed is sometimes the own family ignores them.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw that firsthand.
It's a burden, really, is what it is, and they just can't keep it up. And
right.
So when somebody comes in and takes some time with them like that, that is amazing. That's just amazing. That's great.
See, my mom knew she was doing.
There you go.
Anyway, all right. So you also have the dark stuff, the rape and the other stuff that happened. Is that something that you witnessed firsthand, or was that a patient? Was that something on the premises, or are you allowed to get into that?
I can. So basically, I was just doing my rounds. I was a young kid, new nurse, wasn't at it very long, and I think I was around 21 or so. And I just go in the patient's door. You go in, go to do your stuff, and I find this guy. He was mounting his wife. He was on top of her. He had his trousers down to his ankles, and her diaper pulled down to her ankles. And he was having sex with her, and she was in no position for that. She had just come out of a coma, and she didn't know who anybody was.
Aww.
She didn't even know her husband, And when she was nervous, she would sing nursery rhymes. Mary Had a Little Lamb. She was one of them. Often when you have severe brain damage, the person goes right back to early childhood, because that's the only part of the brain left, And obviously she was not enjoying it. She was rocking in the bed when I said a few things to him and threw him in the hallway with his britches down, And he was mad at me. I was furious. For a couple of seconds, I just stood there. I couldn't believe what was going on. I was like, what the hell? I had to make sense of this,
Mm-hmm.
And so I threw him out of the room, and I checked her right away. Her pulse was about 140 or 50, and the eyes on her. She was just terrified.
Goodness.
She didn't know who he was, So I learned that that's just horrible for any nurse to have to deal with. You would think when you go to your manager and the patient's doctor, who are both female, they would stick up for this woman. And all the other nurses on the floor were women, and not one of them would do anything to stop it, and they were just ignoring it. But in their defense, they were single mothers, young, there's no unions there. I mean, there's no unions in Texas. You mentioned union, you lose your teeth, you know. So they were afraid of their jobs, losing their jobs, I guess. But I just couldn't believe that was going on.
It was afraid of
so,
losing their jobs, or afraid of losing the patient that rented out the whole wing?
Well, I think the individual staff members, there's no benefit to them because the hospital's always full kind of thing, you know.
Okay.
They're just getting paid. They were LPNs, so they were getting like $8 an hour trying to raise kids, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think they were afraid for the job. I mean, I'm just speculating, trying to guess, because I can't understand why other women would sit and watch that go on.
So
and allow it.
how
You know what I mean?
how was this lady getting raped? I thought it was an older lady in a coma, but then you said they were testing her for pregnancy. So how old do you think this person was?
So she was about 40.
Wow.
I said she was old when I was dealing with her, the older lady.
Yeah.
And now that's a lot younger than what I am. So, but you know, so she wasn't that old, but she didn't even know who she was. She didn't know where she was, what was going on, and there's a stranger having sex with her every night, and she was petrified.
Aww.
I mean,
And she probably didn't remember him being there the day before. It's not like, here we go again.
No,
it's all new. Yeah.
She was so bad that we couldn't really put a gauge on what she could remember of what. Like we knew she didn't really recognize us from day to day. You know, so I mean, and she was there for months, right? But yeah, just pathetic. And here I am, a young nurse in that position, and to think that there's a woman having treatment like that day in and day out, and nobody doing anything about it.
Well, thank God you were there to help her. I mean, my goodness.
What's that?
I said, thank God you were there to help her, to be the voice for her.
And I didn't write this to say, hey, look what I did kind of thing. Like, it was just, like any guy I grew up with, or girl, for that matter, that'd be just done, dealt with right away. There's no way that it would go on.
Right.
I think most people around the world would just say, that's not happening. But this particular group of people, and this management, it was just a horrible thing. Now, that doesn't mean every hospital you go to, people are going to be raping you and all that kind of stuff. These are isolated cases.
Right.
But when that does happen, and you go to management and the psychiatrist and the surgeon that's looking after, and they all tell you, good job, Jack, yeah, that's what to do, chart it all, ready to go, and then they let it go on. So they just, shut him up. He's going away for a few days. It was just horrible. There's many things in the book that talk about things like this, like that, and there's, having sex with patients. Like in a psych hospital, we counted up 17 or 18 different staff members that were having sex with patients, and, it was a common knowledge, like it would happen all the time, and nobody would manage it, wouldn't really crack down on it. They would get caught sometimes in their car, in the parking lot, under camera. So stupid,
But does that go to the point of where it's a psych hospital, they're making it up? They don't know what they're talking about. They're crazy. If they get reported, is that what they're looking for, or they just don't think they'll be said?
It really wasn't a lot of that, sadly. It's just people know what's going on. You got some guy going over to a ward that's, a quarter mile away, big hospital, and taking candy to a woman every night, going in her room, and like you'd never, even if you weren't doing anything bad, you wouldn't set yourself up for any kind of scrutiny like that. Like if there's a woman that's deranged or threatens people, rape her all the time, like you don't go in the room with her alone. You make sure another woman comes with you. Like you don't want to set yourself up. But he'd be going in there alone and closing the door, taking her bag of candies, all this kind of stuff. They're allowed to do it for years,
Wow.
Like it was just that.
So my mom worked in a psych ward here in Virginia. I think it was during her residency to become a nurse. Like she had to put, I don't know, a couple hundred hours in or something. And she said the sex was rampant just within the crazy people, the psych people. That they were always, and that they liked to be exhibitionists. So they would go, there's a chain link fence, and they would go out near the highway and have sex. So they were always getting phone calls that they were doing it. The furthest away from the hospital was the closest to the road, and that was my mom's story about that. Is that in every state, or is that only Virginia?
No, I think it's safe to say that happens around the world with that type of patients. We used to have a couple, they'd meet from different wards, and they wouldn't, go behind the tree and do it. They'd lay right out on the lawn, 15 feet away from the main entrance where cars were coming in all day, just laying there with nothing on, humping away.
Oh my goodness.
And everybody would see it, and then the fella, when he was done, be waiting for her to get dressed, he'd stand up with nothing on and do 50 stride jumps every time.
50 what?
So all the other patients are leaning out the windows watching that thing, So,
wow.
I mean, those things are hard. They're hard to control, They're hard to control. There is a lot of sex that goes on, and it's human nature. And some of them, cognitively, they don't have the ability to realize, well, this is a bad idea to do in front of people, or I shouldn't have sex with this. They're not able to understand right and wrong, and some of them are, and they just do it anyway. They're stuck living in psych hospitals for years because of their condition, but you can't take the part about them being a man and a woman and all of the emotions and desires that we have. They have them too,
Right.
Well, that impulsivity, we had a neuro researcher on, and when you have brain injuries, you lose that
Impulse control.
So, I mean, maybe it's a lot of brain injuries as well. They just don't care. They don't think about the consequences. They just do it.
You're correct there. Like, when you get a brain injury, the impulse is gone. There's variations of it, but in a lot of cases, it's right from wrong, and what I should do is just out the window.
Right.
So they just act on it.
Wow.
Like, you see a pretty girl in the mall, you think, wow, she's nice, wow, she's beautiful. I wonder if she's seeing anybody. This is the way a guy would think, But if you had brain damage, you might just walk up to her and say, wow, you have pretty breasts, and they just grab her breasts.
Right.
And, well, that's sexual assault. But, I mean, I've had a case like that. These people just don't know. Their whole rational part is gone. Right and wrong is out the window.
Crazy.
So that's, we see a lot of that in the hospital as well.
All right, so you had 30 years in it. So I know when my mom retired, probably in 2002, that drugs were way different than they were when my mom started in 77. So you probably saw the whole gambit too. I mean, it's everything's written down twice, medical, the pharmacy brings it up to you under lock and key. Originally, when I was a kid, going to visit my mom at the hospital, I mean, as a kid, I could just reach out and grab anything I wanted and put it in my pocket. I didn't, but I mean, it was out in the open. Now everything's under lock and key. What are some of the narcotic stories you've heard or seen or witnessed?
Well, there's a lot of those. I write in the book about a couple of them. Like, in this one hospital I was in, over the course of 4 years, while I was working, while I was physically there at work, I witnessed 5 different nurses get arrested where the police come in, grab them, throw them to the ground, cuff, kicking and squealing, for stealing drugs. And a lot happened when I wasn't there. It was just, you see it a lot,
Was that just a hidden camera type bust, or just investigation?
Well, there's different things. One girl, she got busted because when she came in, usually we do, say, 12-hour shifts. You do 3 nights, you're off for 3. You come back for 2 nights, you're off for 2, that kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she came in, and this patient that she had received demerol every 3 hours, all night for 3 nights in a row. And she wrote the order from this doctor. See, if I have a patient that has a need, I call the doctor and say, hey, look, buddy needs this, we'll give him 2 Tylenol every 6 hours, whatever. So I write Tylenol, 650 milligrams, Q6 hours, as per Dr. Smith or whoever. And then I put a slash and put Jack Houston, And so the nurses take orders and we write them down. That's perfectly common. It happens
Wow.
and take the meds themselves. You know,
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
like it happens a lot, and you think, well, nurses just like to use a lot of drugs, but no, it's the pressures that nurses are under in these hospitals is tremendous. It's absolutely tremendous, you know. And the doctors too, they're under stress as well, but they don't staff as many nurses as should be. Only about half the nurses should be there because you only have to pay half the money, you know. And patients get terrible care. I've worked med surg and been the boss and had 22 patients myself. So nobody's getting good care.
Yeah,
And a lot of
22
things
patients
overlooked.
and one
It's
nurse.
terrible.
Yeah, that's way thin.
Well, and the other girls had 26. The girls had 26 patients, you know. So I had basically the full load. Plus, any problems they have to go through me. That takes my time now. So
All right, so my mom
you don't see for 8 or 10 hours.
worked on a medication floor, so they were almost getting ready to be discharged. They were just watching their medicines and playing with their medicines for the last couple of
Right.
days before they get discharged. That might be okay for for a larger number of patients because you're monitoring them. They're not in. But boy,
Right.
what kind of floor were you on?
Well, that was a med surg floor. So medical patients, kind of like there would be some like what your mom would be dealing with.
Okay,
And
yeah,
surgical patients, which means they had surgery that day,
yeah, that's
which
still.
you need to change dressings or drain stuff, put an IV in. Like you get to work and the 6 patients that were supposed to get an IV started 6 or 7 hours ago.
Oh
and they haven't
gosh.
started. You know, things like that. It was just, how do you ever keep ahead? You know,
Yeah.
it's horrible, horrible. But the drug is really bad. Like even one of our docs he was a great guy. He still is. He's a nice guy. He would help. It was down in Texas, so we had a lot of illegal people there. A lot of Mexicans would come in and they would have no money, and they would ask for this guy because he would treat them and he wouldn't bill them.
Oh.
You know,
Wow.
he was just so nice, and he could have built them because he made lots of money. Would have made a lot more money, you know. But he's just nice, you know, nice guy. But here's this nice guy leaves one day and comes back a few minutes later, still in the scrubs, and drives right through the bay doors of the ER with his Harley and lays it into the desk. It's still wheels still spinning, and he's trying to flush a bag of drugs down the toilet, and the police are slamming his face in the floor and cuffing him. And he's thinking, how the hell can this happen? Like to this guy, everybody loves him. He's great, you know. But even good people, under enough stress, make mistakes and go down that path. But I mean, yeah, there's a lot of drug abuse. You know, nurses that drink on the job, they come in, they undo a screw and take the panel off the fire extinguisher, have a little Mickey of whiskey in their bottle, and patients will even say, oh, do you want me to go get some mix from the canteen for you? You know, because they know he does it every night. And, you know, he'll buy them an extra drink when they go over for him. You know, stuff like that. Like, it's just terrible, the amount of
Wow. So my mom used to tell me stories about when the doctor wrote a prescription for X amount of morphine in the drip per minute or whatever, that she's pretty much ending the person's life because they just give up. Everything just shuts down. They just go to bliss and they.
Just making them comfortable. Then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but she feels like she's killing them, but she's under doctor's orders and she's just doing that. I mean, is that how you believe as well, or is my mom going too far in that analogy?
No, your mom's probably right on. That's called snowing a patient. That's what we refer to. So there's only a certain amount of morphine you can take before it shuts down your respiratory system. And if you're old and have cancer and every system's not working right to begin with, you can't process meds as well as a 20-year-old. So, I mean, you really have to be careful how much meds you give. But it can be argued by the doctor, no, they need this amount of med for pain. Yes, they might quit breathing, but they need it for pain. And everybody kind of knows what's going on. You're being kind to the patient. However, it can put nurses in an awkward position because the nurse feels like, well, I'm just killing this patient.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're following doctor's orders, but yeah, you give the morphine and you know that the respirations are going to stop. And, you know, the problem with that is if somebody doesn't think the patient should be dying right now or they still have time to live or they're snowing them too early, you know what I mean? But if they're down and out and they're unconscious and they're going to die either in 20 hours or 5 hours and they don't recognize family at the bedside
Right.
a bad light.
Well, she doesn't want to lose her job. She was supporting the family at that point, right?
That's right, and that's the catch there. They feel like they're going to lose their job. Some nurses have no problem at all doing it because they know that this patient's in a bad way, and the sooner they're suffering in, the better. And other patients, depending on their religious background, things like that, but that's up to God. I can't. It's not for me to decide. So there's all kinds of things come into play there, and that's been going on since way before I was even a nurse, and it'll probably be going on for a lot of years after. And I would imagine every now and then it heads up, and there's something hits the paper. Should it be going on? And it kind of fizzles out after a while, but it still goes on.
Is it
right? Is it wrong? Everybody's got their own opinion.
Yeah. Well, for the patient, do you know, like, is it? I mean, they can't breathe. You're shutting down their respiratory system. Is that uncomfortable, or they're so out of it they don't even realize? They just slip out.
No, they generally, when I've seen it, they're very uncomfortable. They don't know what's going on. They're experiencing pain, but they can't respond to anyone. They're out of it. They're generally out of it. And my personal thoughts are it's a blessing that the sooner they go, the better.
Yeah.
Okay. Because even though they're out of it, you can't help but think they've got to be suffering a lot inside there. You know what I mean?
See, that's why I'm a magician, man. I can do it to a dog. I can say, hey, the dog's suffering. The vet says the vet knows more than I know. All right, if you got to give it a needle, give it a needle. But my dad, my dad was dying of cancer, and he had Parkinson's since I was a little boy. And I said, looking back on it 20 years after his death, it's kind of a blessing that he did pass away. And that's a horrible thing to say, but I think it's along what you're saying, because I would still be today changing his condom catheter, helping him get dressed in the morning, taking care of him, and actually feeding him at this point. I mean, he'd be in his 80s, but I wouldn't have had a career. I wouldn't have had a job. I wouldn't have had a family, because I cannot pull that trigger and say, yep, he's done.
And it's not just for the family. It's a blessing for the patient.
Yeah.
Because the patient's enduring a lot. Like you said, it's a horrible thing to say, but it really isn't, because it's accurate. Like, it is a blessing sometimes when a person passes earlier rather than later. And I've seen lots of cases of that, and I rarely have seen the opposite. There was one story in the book where the guy he could live a while longer, but he was sick. He wasn't going to have a long time, but he could have some quality of life. And it was basically a decision between his kids, because he wasn't cognitively able to make the decision on his own. He had dementia and stuff, but he still could live. There's a decision, do we make him a DNR, do not resuscitate, or not? You never get all the kids on the same page, it seems like. So there was 4 girls wanted him a DNR because they felt, or didn't want him a DNR.
Right.
Do not resuscitate if it heart happens stuff. And the one son did. And I'm standing at the door doing some charting, and I hear him yelling at the girls. I'm going to paraphrase this. He said, like, what the F is wrong with you? Why do you not want him a DNR? It's effing Chevron stocks. He's got $600,000 worth of Chevron stocks that are going down lower every effing day.
Oh my goodness.
And
well, that's the wrong reason.
There's a lot of love for your father, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like, he wants him to drop quicker so he can get a hold of that Chevron stock before it devalues more.
Wow.
And I just, for being me, I said, I don't believe, and I did have some adjectives I shouldn't have had in there. I won't tell the whole story here, but I said, I don't think there's a line on the DNR sheet that addresses Chevron stocks. And in other words, hey, you're being a real a-hole.
Right.
Like that's just, and how do you not just go put the knuckles to a guy like that? Like, I mean, you see these things. You've been caring for these patients, and you see the way people treat them sometimes. It can be just horrible the way kids treat their parents when they're in the hospital.
Well, and you're saying that guy that has to get the snot vacuumed out of him can hear you and knows what's going on, and Dad's laying right there. So Dad's probably hearing that whole conversation.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I mean, sometimes they can't. I mean, sometimes they don't have the brain activity. They can't make sense of anything. And other times, they're just as sharp as you and I. They're just trapped in that body.
Mm.
And they hear everything. And people talk about them. I've heard them talk, well, when he dies, this and that. And the poor bastard's sitting there listening to it all. He understands everything they're saying. It's just
And now
You're an
he's got
object
family around him just wishing him dead. Wow.
Yeah.
Man.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
Ah, poor people.
Yeah, I've seen it.
But you've
It's
also
just terrible.
you've seen people that have, wishing him dead, but they're there visiting. I'm sure you've also seen the poor people that, die slowly in the hospital and never get a visitor. I feel awful for them as well.
Right.
Yeah, we've had some that we get to know them too because they're in there for 3 or 4 months with, say, severe breathing problems. I remember this one patient, she says, I'm a real SOB when I first met her. SOB stands for short of breath. And she had asthma. So,
Wow.
yeah, and then she said, and I'm a son of a bitch too. She's about 67 or 8, and she was just an old barfly. And she tells me this, I'm just an old barfly. I lived hard, boy, and she's talking away. But, next thing you know, she's like your aunt. She's like your favorite aunt because you're looking after her for 3 months. And where I was doing 16-hour shifts, so a couple of weeks for 3 months. And then she leaves. A couple of months later, she comes back for another 3 or 4 months. Like, how you know these people better than your family?
Wow.
You know,
Yeah, you're
really.
spending time with them more than you are. Yeah.
Well, you do. And then this old girl, one time when she was out, my friend and I, another nurse there, we just got to the bar, and the bartender comes over and says, "Here you go, boys, on the house." Not on the house. These are from Ida, and points across, and here's this old lady sitting on the other side of the bar, talking about a barfly, and sitting there with her oxygen tank, and she holds her thumb up, and smiles. So we went over, said hello, and she had bought us this beer, well, don't talk to me all night, boys. Get after them young girls before you lose them all. Get going,
Wow.
Just like her,
What a
like
sweetheart.
her nephews or something, And a couple of weeks later, we come in for report, and they said we had a bad night last night. I had to come in. She was asking for you, too. She would always ask for, where's my boys? Where's my boys? Just as they wheeled her by on a stretcher to the morgue. She had just died. And we were young guys there, and we couldn't finish report. We had to leave, and, you don't want to cry in front of women. You're a young man. You're just, you're tough, right? Well, we weren't. I mean, you know what I mean?
I'm not. You're getting me teared up thinking about it.
Well, yeah, you're not supposed to get emotional with your patients or how do you not?
Right.
You're human, how do you not get familiar with this person? So, I mean, and she never had anyone visit her. To get back to your point, she never had anyone come in to visit her.
Wow.
It was sad, but yeah, you get to know them, and yeah, so there's lots of stories like that too. But there's enough funny stories in there to kind of level it out. I tried to mix them up a bit. So.
Well, one more thing we were talking about. I've got your paperwork in front of me, the cover of your book, and some stuff here for the podcast. But painkillers and things. I've always heard that a lot of doctors get into taking drugs just to get through med school because they're up 24 hours a day and they have to do those residencies with ungodly hours. Is that what is that a urban legend, or is that something that you've seen firsthand?
Well, that happens with both doctors and nurses, because nurses also have to pull a lot of hours and a lot of studying. It's quite hard to get through for a nurse as well. So it happens to nurses and doctors. And stimulants, mainly stimulants to keep you awake. Okay,
Right.
Then when they need to sleep, they're taking stuff to put them down so they can sleep a few hours. So it's this roller coaster. So that does happen a lot. It doesn't just happen in the medical field. Actually, it happens in a lot of cases where people are struggling to get through schools and universities and things like that. I've had a lot of patients, dealing with them treatment-wise afterwards to get into drugs to try to get through school, and whether they're doctors or nurses. But definitely, yes, in the medical field, because they know more about that. They know which ones will work the best, so they try to manipulate them and get the best out of them without doing harm and all that. And ultimately, it doesn't work.
Yeah, I know absolutely nothing about drugs, so having that lady inject demerol into her butt, I would just figure that I was thinking that was something like morphine. So I imagine just passing out in bliss on the
It's very
floor.
much like morphine. Yeah. It's like a cousin to it.
I don't know how she could think she could
yeah.
work. How could she walk? How could she do anything?
Well, if a regular person just got injected with that, she couldn't work and couldn't walk. But if you're used to it, you can take a lot. Like after a while, you build yourself up to being able to function with quite a bit of it in you.
Wow.
Whatever the drug.
Wow.
So it's not like it's like when somebody's a kid and they drink 3 beer and they're hammered. When they're 40 years old and they drink those 3 beer, they don't feel anything. You get used to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
So-
is that demerol, is it highly addictive, or it's just she wanted that boost? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's a narcotic. It's a
Oh,
narcotic,
okay. Goodness.
Yeah, so it's quite addictive. There's a whole plethora of them out there now, and a lot of them I wouldn't even know because there's so many new ones coming on the market or variations. Depends where you're working as well. Like you go from one side of the country to the other. Like even something as simple as a medicine to take for flying on a plane, an anti-nausea type thing. They won't know what the hell you're talking about. Like all the meds depends on the suppliers that you say. You grew up using a certain amount of things, and you go across the country and they're using different things. They're the same chemical, but there's like 50, 60 different suppliers for each drug, so it's really hard to keep track of it all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like most people know what Tylenol is
Right.
because it's had such advertising, for so many years. It was one of the first ones, but there's probably 50, 60, 70 different suppliers for Tylenol. And a lot of doctors might write that name, and you're like, what the hell is this? You're looking at my, oh, well, that's Tylenol. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it just depends.
Wow. Huh, I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
my buddy Scotty, he passed away right at the beginning of COVID. He worked for the is it FDA for eye surgery. He was an eye surgeon,
Okay.
but he was 85 years old when he died, and he was still reading the new stuff, the charts. I mean, he studied all the time. And he would tell me, "Oh, Wes, you just need this. It's, the only word I know is acetaminophen." But he's like, "Oh, it's just a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of acetaminophen, and that's really all that drug is." And it's like he just rattles this stuff off, and
Yeah.
the dude was amazing to me, not only because he knew magic, but knew medicine, but, I mean, he was just a wealth of knowledge, and he started his career working in a pharmacy making up drugs for people. He worked the soda
yeah.
pop machine and did the drugs in the back in the back of the store and did it all. So it's like he knew all of it. It was amazing. He would rattle off all those different things and different suppliers and different makers and different. Yeah, that's all that is. Really, this company just mixed these two ingredients together, and now they're making millions. But really,
Right.
I could have done that. They didn't do anything. Yeah, it's pretty
Wow.
amazing.
Well, it's the magic of advertisement, too, like there was a commercial years ago, a little jingle like Nitol to help you get your Z's. Do you remember that drug, Nitol, for sleeping?
Sure. I know a NyQuil, the nighttime sniffling, sneezing, coffee, aching, stuffy head, feverish, you can rest medicine.
Well, this one was Nitol, and so basically it would help you get your Z's, your sleep,
Okay.
and it was, I think it worked out to about $1.50 a pill. It was about $8 for 12 of them or something like that. And but if you look beside it, the generic of what that drug was, which is Gravol, you could buy 100 of them for $4.
Oh,
Wow.
jeez.
It was just, and it was just the packaging and the little jingle that pumped that up so massively. That happens all the time. I always tell people, just buy generic. Buy generic.
Yeah.
Don't buy the brand name. You're paying way more just for the name.
Yeah, that Scotty would tell me stories like that all the time.
We always buy
Yeah.
generic.
Jack, this has been awesome, man. It's been sad. It's been fun. Dog humping your leg, but there's more funny stories in there too, right? There's more fun stories, and it all wraps up.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
good.
just kind of hard to tell, you have to kind of read the whole thing and have it come together at the end. So it's hard when you're doing an interview. Hey, it's like if you're a comedian and someone says, say something fun.
Right,
Yeah.
or tell me your joke, or
Yeah.
I saw your show last night. Tell all the listeners that joke. No,
Yeah.
I want you to do it right.
There's a flow to things, right? Yeah.
So tell me, we have like 5 minutes left. Is it's available paperback, hardcover, ebook?
Yeah, all of those. It's pretty well everywhere. You can find it anywhere in all the major platforms. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Smashwords, the Kindle stuff. The ebooks, whatever. But it's the easy way to remember. If you can't remember or you're not writing this down, or driving the car or whatever, nursejack911.com. That's my website. So NurseJack's pretty easy to title the book. 911.com. You go to there, at the bottom of the page, it tells all the places you can buy it. And,
Whoa.
So getting your book seen is, writing is the easy part. So getting it seen, that's the big thing. But I got the guy, Dan Aykroyd's actually looking at it right now, and he's just always looking for new stuff. He just got back to me last week and said he really was impressed with the book. So we'll see if he can do anything with it. I mean, I'm not delusional thinking, I'm going to get a sitcom now or get a weekly show, but you never know with Dan, what he'll do. But I think if the right people got a hold of it, you could easily make it into, one of these, like Grey's Anatomy or something like that. I mean, get the right actors, but I'm just looking for a good review from him and see if he can give me any advice, but you never know.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Dan Aykroyd, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I have this podcast group. It's called Wes Iseli's Magiclife Podcast on Facebook. I'm gonna put I'm gonna put your website on there. I'm gonna put links on there. I'm gonna put the cover of the book. I'm gonna put the podcast on there. And when you get a testimonial from Dan Aykroyd, you definitely let me know. I'll put it on there, or you put it on there, and
Okay.
let us know. Keep in touch, man. We want to be able to promote this thing and help you out. This has been a blast, man. Thank you so much.
Well, that's great. Thank you for having me both. I appreciate both of you taking the time to talk to me, and that's great. Thanks.
Dude, I wish you all the best, man. Stay on the line real fast. I'm going to do a couple plugs, and we'll get out of here. Guys, check out nursejack911.com. One more time, that's nursejack911.com. And the book is called Nurse Jack. It's pretty easy. Also, check out wesisley.com for all of our show merch and our public show schedule. We have 3 theater gigs listed up there right now, and we have a couple others we're just trying to reel in, just trying to work out dates. But check out wesisley.com. And see you next week. Check us out online at wesisley.com and patreon.com/Wes_Isley for behind-the-scenes videos, blooper videos, never-before-seen footage, discounts on merchandise, magic trick tutorials, and more. That's Wes Iseli, spelled WESISELI.